latest Pixar film, Turning Red, drops on Disney Plus this weekend, so let's talk about it. Turning Red tells the story of a 13-year-old girl who loves boy bands, but things get complicated when she discovers that she turns into a big red panda whenever she gets emotional. Before I give you my thoughts on Turning Red, be sure to join me down below in the comment section if you've seen it, what did you think about it, and if not, what is your excitement level for the film? With that said, let's get started with the review. And I'm going to talk about this movie a little bit differently. Typically, I organize my reviews into the good, the mixed, and the bad. For this one, I'm going to talk more about the various different parts of the film, simply put, because I didn't like this film. At the time I'm recording this review, it has a Rotten Tomatoes score of over 90%. All of the tweet reactions to the film that I saw were people ranting and raving about how amazing the film was. And that simply was not my experience watching this film. And so my typical structure, I don't think was the best way to properly elaborate on why this movie didn't work for me. And more importantly, why I found this movie rather alienating. And that's what I found very strange about it. It wasn't just that I didn't enjoy it. Like Cars 2 isn't a movie that I enjoyed, but I just think it's stupid. It's just beneath Pixar to make a movie that juvenile. That's not what this was. This was a movie that tried to do something different and ambitious in many ways, and what they did really felt alienating to me. It did not sit well with me at all, and a number of things were specifically off-putting. So diving right into this is a Pixar film, and so obviously this, in many ways, is just a top-notch production because they are a world-class film studio, and over the last 25 years, I would say that they're very potentially the best film studio out there with one of the absolute best track records, right along with Marvel Studios. They just consistently put out quality entertainment, and as an animation studio, they have world-class animators, so it is absolutely gorgeous. There's a lot of unique, interesting things they do with the animation where it pulls in kind of some techniques from anime while using Pixar style at the same time. So there's just ways they visualize the 13-year-old frenetic energy. It's interesting, it's new, it's different, it's not something that I had seen before. And as always, they take a quirky concept, tie it to big human emotions that are deeply relatable. That is the Pixar formula, telling stories that have a weirdness to them, but also have deep, rich human emotions. But typically, Pixar movies are made to have very broad appeal to where my 3-year-old can love them and understand them, and me as a grown man can watch them be like, have a lot of fun with what's in there. And they're designed in a way to entertain the entire family and have something for everyone and feel safe for a family to watch them together. And this is a much more specific, targeted film. And what I mean by that is a large percentage of Pixar films take fish, toys, monsters, cars, and they tell a story that touches on the human experience. And so they kind of strip away cultural specificity, but have the human experience in there through these non-human creatures. Some have humans, but a lot of them don't. In Turning Red, it's a story about a 13-year-old human girl in Toronto that is infatuated with boys, that loves boy bands, that is from a very Asian family steeped in Asian culture, who is currently going through puberty, and who turns into a big red panda whenever she gets emotional. And so it's very specific in the target audience and the relatability of what's happening, because it doesn't strip away the cultural specificity and make it about a car. It makes it about a human girl in a specific city and very specific interests. Therefore, the movie is extremely relatable to specific people. If you're from Toronto, if you're obsessed with the opposite sex in middle school, if you're into boy bands, it specifically is highly relatable to you. But it's not broadly relatable, in which case it's an intentionally niche film. It's a movie made for a targeted audience that will probably absolutely eat this movie up and have a great time with it. And you can see a lot of that on Twitter with people saying, this is the most relatable Pixar movie I've ever seen. I've never related to a Pixar protagonist like the lead character in this film. I had the total opposite experience because my middle school years were nothing like anything in this movie. Now, I watched this movie because it's a Pixar film, and prior to this, they've made movies that are broadly accessible to the entire family. So even though I am a 40-year-old man, I enjoy almost every other Pixar film and find them relatable. If you'd asked me, Sean, do you want to watch a movie about a 13-year-old girl going through puberty who wants to go see a boy band in concert, I would tell you, no, that's probably not the right movie for me. I'm not the target audience, and that isn't something that interests me. I only watched it because it's a Pixar film, and that's not normally the case with how Pixar films play out. They made a very specific, targeted movie. That doesn't make it good or bad, but that is what they did, and this movie is not going to be for a lot of people, and it certainly wasn't for me. And I think the key thing about it is that they didn't tackle the subject matter in a way that drew me in and made me fall in love with the characters despite the fact that it's not subject matter I'm inherently interested in or can relate to. It tackled it in a way that as the movie went along, I found it more and more inaccessible and more alienating, and it did more and more things that were off-putting to me. And that's not a good sign. It's a movie that I can't really relate to, and the elements I can relate to, I'm not particularly interested in reliving. And as I've been alluding to all along, this is a very unusual film inside of the Pixar canon because it has kind of the Pixar polish to it. It has the quirkiness of the person turning into the panda, but a bunch of elements about the way the story is structured, the specificity, and even the edginess to it feels very out of place with other Pixar films. And so in a number of ways, this is the most mainstream film that they've done. It plays essentially like Teen Wolf for middle school girls, or Teen Panda for middle school girls, using this panda metaphor, being a metaphor for going through puberty, periods, pads, and all of it, in which case it's a very mainstream sort of story, but also going into specificity with detail with it that can be a bit uncomfortable, which is not typically what Pixar has done. But then adding to that, it's also one of Pixar's weirdest films, with the way that it actually plays out when you're watching it. When they're trying to deal with some of the situation with the panda, they start doing sacred rituals where portals open and we're in this other realm. It gets very weird at times during this film while telling a very mainstream story about a teenage girl that wants to go see a boy band. Like, it touches on a bunch of different things. So on the one hand, it's their most mainstream, and on another hand, it's also one of their weirdest, which also makes the whole experience very strange to get your head around if it's not something that you immediately love. Continuing on that idea, so many Pixar films make the lead character a cute fish, a toy, a car, something that just has a certain playfulness to it that can soften some of the more irritating aspects of characters. Woody has a very insecure element to him that could be very off-putting, but when you look at just this cute-looking toy, it takes the edge off. With this movie, you're watching a story about a group of 13-year-old girls, and it does a good job of bringing these 13-year-old girls to life and making them seem like 13-year-old girls that you know in real life. The movie successfully makes you feel like you're spending 90 minutes with a group of 13-year-old girls who are obsessed with boys in boy bands. As someone who has worked with teenagers since 2003 and has done countless car rides with groups of teenage girls who are obsessed with boys and boy bands, that's not actually something that I find fun and enjoyable. I have been in far too many car rides, hearing way too much about Harry Styles and how dreamy he is, and re-listening to That's What Makes You Beautiful over and over and over again, to want to go see a movie about that as escapism. Like I said, I've dedicated nearly 20 years of my life to trying to help teenagers and 13-year-old girls process through a confusing phase of life. Watching them be hyperactive, hyper-hormonal 13-year-old girls for 90 minutes isn't specifically what I want to do for entertainment. Now, at its core, this is a story about a teenage girl whose hormones are going crazy, and this has led a number of reviewers to describe it as the horniest Pixar movie yet. Now, I can't imagine a scenario where I would describe a movie about children as horny, but it is a story about this girl discovering sexual attraction. Now, if Pixar wants to take their studio in a different direction and make stories for middle schoolers, just for teenagers, they can do whatever they want. But when you have a brand that has not been about children discovering their sexuality while going through puberty, that's something that obviously will be a bit of a shift for some people. Like, as a parent, I'm trying to decide, when do I show this to my kids? Do I want to show it to my kids? What does that even look like? Would they enjoy it? Would they understand it? And there's so much more in here to process as to whether it's okay for my children to watch, because the studio has done something they have not normally done. And when you create a brand that people trust, that stands for something, and you do something different from that, that will have consequences. And you will have pushback from that. And I imagine there's going to be a number of parents this weekend that are very confused by what they saw in the latest Pixar film. And I wish they'd done more to make it clear that this isn't a story that's designed for all ages in the same way that their other movies were. And as I said earlier, this is a movie that, as it went along, it became more and more alienating to me. Right out of the gate, the first 15 minutes, the hyperactive nature of the 13-year-old girls was just a bit much for me. They were just not people that I immediately connected with and was like, I find this character charming. That's not what I felt. So I always kind of felt the movie was a bit abrasive. And then it starts to tackle the metaphor of the panda, and it starts overtly discussing periods and pads. Very clearly, that's what this turning red metaphor is referring to in the title of the film. And so I did some things like, that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. Okay, but how much of that is just me? Some of that's just on me, that I'm uncomfortable about certain subject matter. Okay. But as it went along, it started just doing more and more things, made more and more choices that didn't need to be there, that were they just pushed me away and put a really bad taste in my mouth the more and more the movie went along. A big, gigantic one being is, as you move into the third act, as you kind of get the final showdown of everything kind of taking place, without wanting to go into too many specifics, I don't want to spoil anything. There are some things that can't be spoiled about where this story goes. An element of the big battle, however you want to call it, in the film involves this 13-year-old girl twerking at her mother as an act of rebellion. First off, Pixar is not a studio known for edgy humor like twerking, especially with a child shaking their butt at an adult. There's a number of things about this that are just very off-putting to me. The idea of, like, this obviously is sexual dancing in a club setting, but this is not a sexual setting because it's involved with the parent and everything like that. But the implications are very clear as to what's going on here. And I've read some of the other reviews of the movie prior to when I shot this, and people talked about how it's a story about, rebelling against sexual oppression. And once again, I find it very weird that I'm discussing a Pixar film and how the final battle has elements of rebelling against sexual oppression as the 13-year-old girl twerks at her mother as a big middle finger to mama. That's an off-putting thing. As a parent trying to think, what am I going to show my kids and what is just in good taste, that is not in good taste to me. And I truly shocked when it started happening, like, wow, that 13-year-old girl twerking at her mother right there. Well, that is actually happening. I don't like that at all, and this movie keeps moving further and further away from anything that I would enjoy. And then finally, in this category of things that I just found truly off-putting about this film, the movie contains the line, "My panda, my choice." Clearly a reference to the phrase, "my body, my choice," the pro-choice slogan. And wherever you fall on the issue of abortion, it's deeply personal, emotional, polarizing, and a complex issue, and not one to just flippantly turn into a joke. Flippantly just toss in as a cute reference to a red panda. Tossing it in there. That to me is, shockingly in bad choice. I can't recall ever hearing a cute little flippant abortion joke or reference in an animated movie for the whole family ever before. I can't think of one, in which case the fact that Pixar went so kind of far into this edgy direction of like, let's touch on uncomfortable material and let's put in flippant jokes related to gigantic polarizing issues is shocking to me. Like, I was like, I was thinking to myself, like, did that really just happen? Let me check. They really just said that? Like, what benefit does that give the movie? How does that move things forward? That just feels like you're adding something edgy in just to be edgy. Feels like you're throwing something in there just to touch on a women's health issue without having anything to say about it. I couldn't believe it. I still can't believe it. And I watched the movie several days ago, and that to me was something that just like sealed the deal of like, I don't know what they were doing with this movie, but it seemed like they were very intentionally just trying to push boundaries for the sake of pushing boundaries. And that's just not what Pixar is known for or has been. And if that's what Pixar is now, like, I watched this film and I went, well, I guess I'm not going to be watching every Pixar movie moving forward because they're not making movies for everyone anymore. They're making niche films, and that's fine if they want to do that, but acknowledge that that's what you're doing. This is not a movie for the whole family. This is not a movie for everyone. This is a movie made for a very targeted audience, told only for that audience, to resonate with a specific audience, and without concern for how other people enjoy it, in which case, it didn't sit all that well with me. And finally, I found the message and the metaphor to be a jumbled mess. It's a movie that's trying to tackle too many issues, all using a simple metaphor that doesn't fit particularly well. It wants to tackle puberty, relationships with parents, relationships with friends, all using a cute metaphor. And in doing so, the message gets entirely lost. Like, I'm not really sure what this movie was trying to say with a bunch of it. It has all sorts of elements about rituals, about getting rid of try to get rid of the panda, which this metaphor about puberty and periods, like, I don't know what that means. Uses phrases like "my panda, my choice," which doesn't fit in nicely either with this message about puberty and periods. And so it's just a film that was trying to do too many things, tackle too many ideas, all while packaging it with the Pixar formula. And puberty is complex. Sexuality is complex. It doesn't fit neatly into a simple metaphor, especially if you're going to layer friends and family dynasties and cultural expectations all into one little simple thing. It doesn't work. That's what this movie felt like to me. It was trying to do too many things. It was too targeted, and it was very unclear what it was trying to say. And because I found the lead characters more irritating than amusing, I didn't find it funny either. So while I can respect that they wanted to try and tackle some uncomfortable issues that aren't often addressed in family entertainment, I don't think they succeeded at it. I think they tackled them in a way that was very alienating and off-putting at times. I did not enjoy this movie at all. Well, that was a doozy of a review. If you've seen the movie, let me know what you thought about it down below in the comments section. A lot of people are loving it. If you're someone that watched the trailer and could relate to some of the subject matter, if you're someone that loved the trailer, check out other people's reviews, because I'm just one person's opinion. I did not like the film. A lot of people are loving the film. Don't just listen to me, go listen to other people. And once you see it, or if you've seen it, let me know what you thought down below in the comment section. I'm expecting this to be Pixar's most polarizing film. Typically, Pixar makes movies that everybody likes or likes to loves. They don't make movies that push people away. I think this is going to be one that a lot of people are like, what were they doing? Oh, I'm not interested in that. That was weird. Boy bands? What? What's going on here? And so I think this is going to be their most polarizing film yet. Now, if you want to hear me say a lot more positive things about a bunch of Pixar films, check out my Pixar ranking right over there or right up here when this video is over with. I love most Pixar films. They have an amazing track record. That's why this one stood out so much to me, because I really didn't like it. With Turning Red, Pixar tried something different. They tried to make a movie that's more targeted to a specific audience and an older audience. And Pixar can do whatever they want, but if you're going to pivot your brand in a new direction, naturally that's going to be alienating to a bunch of people that loved the work that you did before and have a certain expectation going into the film. I watched this movie because it was made by Pixar, and traditionally that's meant this is a movie that I will probably like. And instead, I got a movie that was very specifically targeted at an audience very different from me and packaged in a way that was off-putting to me and really stepped on my toes at times with the way that it decided to tackle some sensitive issues and some things that were present in the film. So I did not like this film. And while I would say that this is a better made movie than Cars 2, I would rather rewatch Cars 2 than rewatch Turning Red. Because Cars 2 is just a dumb movie that's beneath Pixar. I felt that this was an off-putting movie with characters that I did not enjoy spending time with, that really stepped on my toes at times. So I got to the end of it and I thought, I would be fine never watching that movie again. Overall, it's a C- on the entertainment scale of 4.5 out of 10. And I would say skip this movie unless you were like super into boy bands during middle school. But that's just my opinion. A lot of people are loving this film. If you are excited for it, go check out some other people's reviews that line up more with your anticipation level for the film and see if it's right for you. Don't just take my word for it. Other people have opinions too. Also, if you're mad at me for not liking the film, I can get being disappointed, but please listen to my arguments, understand my perspective. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to voice my experience with this film as someone that enjoys most Pixar films, that watches them with my whole family, and this one did not sit well with me. Stop and consider why that is. Don't just get mad at me. Hear my perspective, learn from it. I would love to hear yours as well, as long as you're respectful. Also, if you want to hear my thoughts on the other Pixar films, the ones that I enjoyed more than this one, check out my Pixar ranking. It's right over there, I believe. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.